Greetings, fellow seekers of the Mirrored City. I am the Lord Gregan, and I bring you a few insights that hopefully will help you last longer in your forays into the forbidden city of Shadespire. Today, we do a bit of a recap. First, in the last video, we covered the vital subject of objectives, how they will break or make your game. But now we shift our attention onto the power deck, specifically a section of it, the Ploys. Ploy cards are essential to your game. Again, to home the point, your game will be made or broken by your objectives. So it's important that you don't have incredibly awful first draws, because that way you are wasting a lot of glory and opportunities. But it's also important that your weapon is properly equipped to tackle the objectives you've set yourself to. Otherwise, you'll not be able to score them, and you'll have a very, very meager score and output. So here enters the power deck and the ploys. The power deck consists of at least 20 cards. Of this, 10 will be upgrades. The other half will be gambits. Gambits in themselves are divided into spells and ploys. Since not all the weapons want to use spells because they are unable to, and those that do use spells will most likely want something tailor-made to a specific strategy, we'll only cover ploys in this episode. Again, as per usual, if you are a veteran, you may want to use the comments section to use the timestamp and access to the actual recommendations. If you are a newbie, I recommend you stick through this introduction a bit and learn a few of the basics. So again, the ploys are incredibly important because they will help you greatly achieve your objectives. Why? Because they give you effects that, even though they only happen through a specific activation or moment, have incredibly potent effects, like for example covering a lot of ground, or doing extra damage, or just foiling your opponent's war plan. They are meant to generate breakthroughs that you can therefore exploit and get an advantage on your opponent, or maybe close the gap and break the momentum the opponent has gained. But basically, they are meant to give you opportunities to win, so to speak, aside from the chances your fighters have to kill the opponent. But I digress a bit. Nevertheless, it's important to know how your ploys will play, how you want them to play, because they will help you greatly in achieving your strategies. And the first thing to know is to synergize with your weapon and objective deck, to synergize with your strategy. Why I say this? Because it's important that, again, your ploys are in synergy with your objectives. Why I mean this? Because, again, let's remember, your game is made or broken by your objectives. You'll win or lose by your objectives. Therefore, it's important that your ploys are geared towards helping you achieve those objectives. Now, fair point of warning. Your objective shouldn't be achievable only by the usage of cards, because you are setting yourself in the way of disappointment. You can only have at least about 15 cards out of 20, so you have a chance of not getting the desired card. So whenever you build a deck, let's remember, you have to build the power deck around your objectives, around what you want to do, because that way you'll have a good battle plan, because it will go accordingly to your strategy. But nevertheless, you must avoid being too dependent on your cards. They are meant to help you, not do all the work for you, but it's a possibility to get a lot of help from them. Still, again, if you want to play an aggressive deck, you'll want aggressive cards, and so speaking. Build a deck that is indeed pretty coordinated with your objectives. With this digression said, and hello veterans, by the way, we'll jump onto the actual recommendations. The first ones are to seek cards that give you out-of-activation actions. What do I mean by this? In Shadespire, as you know, you have only 12 activation tokens, 12 chances to do action. Nevertheless, though, there's a handful of ploys that give you the opportunity of doing actions outside your activations, even if you've charged, which you shouldn't be able to as per the base rules. These type of cards come at a premium. They are very important because they'll give you a lot of utility, either from getting away from your opponents to being able to achieve kills more reliably, or in case something has gone awry, try to put a bit of distance or finish up the opponent before he has a chance of retaliation. Basically, doing the best defense, which is a good offense. To the point, you want cards that give you out of activation activity because they give you further chances at victory. You don't have only 12 chances at scoring objectives. You have 12 plus whatever actions out of activations you can get through the cards. They expand your pool of opportunities and your chances at victory. Now on to the second tip, which is to seek ploys that improve your mobility or force it in your opponent. Mobility comes at a premium in Shadespire, because you only have a chance to move a fighter once per battle as a rule, well, once per round, per activation phase. You can charge, which is moving and attacking, but you further limit yourself because you cannot activate that fighter later until the end of the phase and onto the next one. So cards that increase your mobility, that increase your strategic depth, how far you will get into the battlefield, are incredibly important. For example, first bear in mind the horrible drawing and focus a bit on the, well, I was going to call it the black dot, but the black splotch that tries to be a dot is your fighter. The red line is how far he could move, and the green line how far he could reach with a weapon with a 1 hex range. The white circle is the opponent. Now, as you can see, he is safe because you cannot reach him. But if you have a card that increases your movement by 1 or pushes you 1 hex, all of a sudden you can reach the opponent. This has the showcased effect, these cards that increase mobility. They give you the opportunity to hurt your opponent even though they were initially safe, thus incrementing the utility you get from the move actions, and get him out of card because he was out of harm's way, he was out of your operational reach. But with these cards you can reach him, and therefore you can get him out of position, out of support, or maybe he has charge, etc. You're basically giving yourself an opportunity to strike even though you weren't supposed to, which is pretty good if you are playing an offensive. But cards that provide mobility are also important for other purposes, and those are specifically those that force mobility on the opponent. For example, look at the following map. The black circles are your fighters. The red circle is the opponent. You have 3 fighters, but only 1 in touch with your opponent. But what if you were to push him here? All of a sudden, you have 2 supporting fighters in defense or also offense. Therefore, you are putting him in an incredibly rough position because you will have a 33% increase in your chances to hit him or pass a saving roll. And furthermore, cards that increase mobility also have other uses. For example, look at here. If the opposing fighter was here and you were to push him here and then attack from here, from this 1 hex where my mouse is, he will be trapped. Cards that force mobility on your opponent do either bring him to positions you are favorable to, where you have an advantage, or where he is at a disadvantage. They play an important role because they screw royally your opponent's plans and give you a better chance at killing him or succeeding. So to recap, cards that increase mobility or force it on the opponent are incredibly important because they give you a better shot at achieving your objectives and make his life harder and make his efforts harder to achieve. This is the second tip, the ones that mobility. To focus on cards that give you mobility because they will give you a whole new swath of opportunities to achieve victory. Now on to the third tip, which is to look into your woven's ploys and seek whichever suit your strategy best. You have a very limited amount of woven specific ploys, and these are geared toward a specific way of play, maybe not the one you are seeking, but if the stars align, and it is the case, it may be in your interest to pick up these cards. Why? Well, because these cards will never be banned, because they are not electable for the banned and restricted list. Why? Because the banned and restricted card list is something that everyone takes. If a card is specific to a specific warband, specific match, well, if that is the case, it will not be banned because not everyone will be taking these cards. That means that you are safe, that you can breed reliability, familiarity, and mechanization of strategy with these cards. Plus, they are pretty synergized with your warband's way of playing, which means that they will do what you want to do at the best way possible. But this is the basic idea. With this said, we jump onto the fourth one, which is to seek a measure of redundancy. I mentioned it previously, but there's a chance that you may not be able to get your card. Shadespire is a game that features a fair degree of randomness, especially in the thing of cards. For example, you may not be able to draw the card, as I said before. And therefore, it's important to seek a measure of redundancy, to have multiple cards that do either the same or something that is awfully similar. That way, you give yourself a better shot at getting the effect you want. And furthermore, since these are things that you want to happen multiple times, to trigger multiple times, if you do get these multiple cards, you will be able to use them. It will not go to waste. Now on to the fifth tip, which is to do not abuse cards that are reliant on rolls. Cards that are reliant on rolls, like for example Rebound, are extremely potent in the FX, but they have a tricky element, in that they do not always trigger because they are dependent on the roll. And this is important because if you are playing a tournament match, you'll need this to happen every single time if your strategy is dependent on this. So if you have, for example, a 50% chance of success and a 3-match tournament, that means that you have 50, 25 and 12.5 chances of success across the whole tournament. It is therefore important to not over-rely on these cards, because the chances of things going properly and as accordingly to plan decrease exponentially as you further progress through the ladder and through the matches, and you basically are tainting luck. Ploys are meant to hedge your bets, to help you achieve your objectives. They are not meant to be a further hazard, a further uncertainty, a further liability. You may want to include some ploys that are reliant on rolls, but do not go overboard with them. Do not. Now on to the sixth tip, which is reaction cards are your friend. Reaction cards play a very important role in that they trigger whenever something is about to happen, for sure. Thus, you have the certainty they will be useful. Well, unless they are reliant on rolls, but I digress. These cards, whenever they happen, the effect happens when your opponent is about to gain an advantage, you will be able to automatically stimulate his advance. Or, if you're about to gain an edge, by example being able to equip an upgrade, you may be able to further increase this advantage automatically thanks to the reaction cards. Reaction cards give you flexibility with the chance to do effects out of your activations and on the most ideal moment as per the card's description. Now with this, we'll jump onto the last tip, which is to look into your restricted card list and the cards that boost your offensive stats. The banner list is something that is pretty useful and it may reek of net listing, but they are pretty useful. I cannot overstate it. The cards that are in this list will bring you a ton of utility, a ton of use, because they are very potent. That's why they are restricted and you can only take 5. Now, bear in mind, the restricted card list is extremely limited resource because you only have 5 of these across the 3 categories: upgrades, objectives, and ploys. Therefore, it's important to have a clear split on what you want to do. Now, if your warband is a one that has strong stats, which is something that we'll cover on the upgrades video, I recommend to go at a split of 3-2 for objectives and ploys. And if your warband is one that has weak stats, especially weak offensive stats, I recommend to reserve one of those slots into upgrades. But generally speaking, you want a bit of a split. You will not want to have all your restricted cards into single category because they are pretty useful, but not as useful as to sacrifice the restricted card list from all the categories. The second part of the tip is damage increases. Damage increases are extremely useful because they happen, generally speaking, whenever the effect is about to happen, whenever your attack has happened and has had success. Which means that you get a better shot at killing the opponent from the get-go, from the moment it happens. You are not risking it, generally speaking. Now, there's a few that do happen prior to the success of the attack, and those are a bit more of a liability, but they are still pretty damn useful, because free of charge, you get better capabilities at killing opponents, or outright scoring objectives like Crushing Force, which is do as much damage as the opponent has wound stat, which is hard but feasible if you have these kind of weapons. And therefore, you want cards that give you a better shot at killing the opponent, be either by increasing the number of dice you can chuck at the roll, because they give you a more reliable attack, a more reliable chance at success in case you want to kill the opponent in an offense, or want to react at him and try to get him out of you before he has a chance at further attacking you. And damage increases again because they give you an easier time killing opponents, getting things out of the way. With this, I will conclude my recommendations. I hope you've gained something useful in picking cards. Again, I think the most important things are the first two items, as well as a bit of the last one. You want a lot of out of activation activity cards, a lot of mobility cards because they let you go farther in the battle and screw your opponent's positioning, which is key in this game. And lastly, you want damage increases because they give you a better shot, a more efficient shot in killing the opponents, which is what this game is about: efficiency, economy. Well, I hope you've learned something useful today, and may your forays into the forbidden city of Shadespire be fruitful. Gregan out.